Okay, so listen to this, because Ryan Reynolds' old Deadpool co-star TJ Miller finally opened up about what really went down once the cameras stopped rolling, and it is not the story you'd expect from Hollywood's self-proclaimed nicest guy. For more than 20 years, the public has been sold on the idea that Ryan Reynolds is exactly the kind of guy you'd want to grab a drink with. Every talk show sit down, every commercial spot, every red carpet moment was carefully built to sell that same image: relatable, funny, down to earth, just like the rest of us. Then, that carefully constructed illusion cracked in a way nobody saw coming. Back when the first Deadpool film began shooting, Ryan wasn't the box office giant he is now. He was an actor scrambling to rebuild a career that had taken hit after hit. Let's be honest, his track record up to that point was shaky at best. A few wins, plenty of misses, and he was sitting at that dangerous crossroads in Hollywood where you either land the comeback role or you spend the rest of your career picking up scraps in supporting parts. So when Deadpool landed in his lap, Ryan needed it in a way he'd probably never admit to now. He needed the ensemble cast around him to help sell the jokes and keep the tone from collapsing under its own weight. Strip away the supporting actors, and Deadpool is just one guy cracking wise in spandex, and that's not how comedy actually lands on screen. You need performers like TJ Miller bringing that specific, chaotic energy that makes a scene actually work. In those early days, the dynamic between Ryan and his co-stars was genuinely solid. There was real teamwork happening, everyone pulling in the same direction. Ryan relied on that ensemble every bit as much as they relied on him. Then, everything shifted. The first Deadpool pulled in $782 million against a modest budget, which in industry terms is basically minting cash out of thin air. It became Marvel's scrappy underdog success, and Ryan Reynolds became the face of it.
But I think after he got super, super famous from the first Deadpool, then things kind of changed. I think he was like, see, you guys see. And then I think I don't know. I mean, would I work with him again? No.
That kind of success rocketed him into a completely different tier of stardom, the kind where studio heads return your calls personally and your name alone can move tickets. But instead of gratitude toward the people who helped get him there, something darker took root. What grew instead was a deep-seated insecurity that Ryan buried under an inflated ego. He started behaving as though he alone carried the movie to success. The grind put in by the supporting cast and crew, the people who actually built that film from nothing, got dismissed. He let that first win completely rewire how he saw himself, and he turned into someone that people who knew him beforehand barely recognize today. This is where TJ Miller becomes central to the story, arguably the most important voice in the whole thing, because he was there from day one. TJ played Weasel, the sarcastic bartender running Sister Margaret's home for wayward girls. He'd known Ryan back when they were still grinding toward the same goal together. He watched the fallout as success rewrote how Ryan treated the people around him. He saw that transformation happen in real time, and it must have been genuinely painful watching someone he respected turn into a completely different person. TJ knew who Ryan was before the fame got to him. Underneath the ego was someone who genuinely needed his collaborators to hold things together, but that version of him seemed to vanish the moment the paychecks got bigger. This is where things take a darker turn, and honestly, this is the moment that set everything else into motion. It happened on an otherwise unremarkable day on set. Nothing about the atmosphere suggested anything was about to go sideways. The scene had already wrapped. The crew was ready to move to the next setup. Everyone was worn out and ready to call it, that typical exhausted energy you get at the tail end of a long shoot day. But Ryan, using his top-billed clout, pushed for one more take. And look, if you've spent time on sets like this, you know that when the lead actor wants another take, you give him another take. That's simply how the hierarchy works, and TJ went along with it. But Ryan had other plans. He used his character as cover to launch what felt like a genuine dig at TJ Miller himself. In character, Ryan reminded his co-star exactly where he stood in the pecking order, essentially telling him he was nobody next to him, that he was only there to deliver setup lines before the real star could take over.
He had a really weird moment on Deadpool where he said, let's do one more take. And everyone was like, okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And then as the character, he was like horrifically mean to me. But to me.
Cathartic.
As if I'm Weasel.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So he was like, you know what's great about you, Weasel? You're not the star. But you just, you do just enough exposition that it's funny, and then we can leave and get back to the real.
In doing that, he exposed his own desperate need to dominate the room. He was cutting down a fellow performer purely to build himself up, to make sure everyone remembered exactly who the star was and who was just filler. And here's the part that makes it worse. He hid behind the performance. He was in character, so maybe in his own head that gave him an excuse. Maybe he told himself it was just committed acting, but nobody on that set bought it. The crew who witnessed the exchange were visibly rattled. These are professionals paid to stay silent and keep working, and even they were thrown off by what they just watched unfold. Everyone in that room understood Ryan had stepped over a serious line. He was using his position to belittle someone who had no real way to push back, and TJ Miller absorbed every word of it, knowing precisely what was happening and precisely why. TJ walked off that set knowing his relationship with Ryan Reynolds would never look the same again. He would never forget the feeling of being told, essentially, that he didn't matter enough to be there. Ryan Reynolds has poured millions of dollars and countless hours into convincing the public he's a champion of empathy and conflict resolution. He gives speeches about the importance of hearing out people who disagree with him. This is a guy who built an entire ad agency, Maximum Effort, around the premise of being likable. That's not a side hustle, that's the entire business model. Every move he makes is designed to make the public feel like Ryan Reynolds is basically their friend. And here's what's wild. That persona alone is valued somewhere in the 9-figure range. Take away the perception that he's genuinely a good person, and the whole structure risks collapsing, which is exactly why this next part matters so much. The story that leaked from the set undercut all of that corporate messaging and every carefully worded speech. The nice guy image turned out to be exactly that, just an image covering for someone insecure enough to use his power to belittle people who worked alongside him. TJ Miller made an observation about Ryan that's worth sitting with. He suggested Ryan might genuinely believe everyone adores him, that in his own mind he's a source of joy in people's lives, while completely tuning out the damage he causes to those laboring beside him day after day. There's a real disconnect between his self-image and the reality of how he treats people. He can stand in front of a crowd preaching kindness while turning around and humiliating his own co-stars. And the TJ Miller situation wasn't an isolated event. Consider what went down with Tim Miller, the filmmaker who first got Deadpool onto the big screen in the first place. Without Tim Miller's vision and effort, Ryan likely never reaches this level of stardom at all. That director essentially rescued his career. And yet, despite owing him an enormous debt, Ryan eventually pushed him off the sequel entirely. Here's how that unfolded. After the first film's success, Ryan wanted full creative control over the franchise going forward. He treated Deadpool like personal property rather than a shared creative effort. He began pushing for the sequel to lean harder into his preferred comedic style. Tim Miller, meanwhile, wanted to push the film forward with sharper action and deeper character work. His goal was crafting something genuinely great, not just a showcase built entirely around Ryan. That clash was probably inevitable. Ryan leaned on his newfound power and financial leverage to go head-to-head with the very director who made his comeback possible. He also fought for control over casting, particularly clashing with Tim Miller over who would play the pivotal character Cable. In the end, despite having developed the script and laid the entire groundwork for the sequel, Tim Miller was pushed off the project. The line fed to entertainment press was creative differences, Hollywood shorthand for a messy exit nobody wants to explain in detail. But the reality was simpler than that. Ryan's ego couldn't tolerate working alongside a director who pushed back on his vision or expected an equal creative voice. He chose to force out the man who built the franchise rather than share credit with anyone. And because Ryan's face was what sold the tickets and anchored the marketing, the studio let him consolidate that power and shape the franchise around his own comedic instincts and insecurities. Tim Miller walked away with nothing. He lost the job, lost the franchise, and lost his connection to what became one of the biggest superhero properties on the planet. Ryan didn't seem to carry any guilt over it. In his mind, he didn't owe Tim Miller anything, because as far as he was concerned, he was the sole reason any of it worked. That forced exit gives crucial context to the TJ Miller incident. It shows Ryan has a documented pattern of turning on the very people closest to him the moment they stop serving his needs or challenge his authority. The pattern is obvious. Lean on someone who helped build your success. Use them until they've outlived their usefulness, then cut them loose the moment they ask for basic respect or creative equality. That's simply how Ryan operates, and it's how he's always operated. Now here's where things escalate. Once TJ Miller went public with his account on the Adam Carolla show, Ryan understood exactly what was on the line. That leak threatened to unravel everything Ryan had built, exposing his public persona as fundamentally dishonest. Every past interview about being a good guy now read as pure hypocrisy. What happened next says everything about who Ryan Reynolds really is. In apparent panic, he reached out to TJ Miller the next day, but not with a real apology. Instead, he sent a private message pressuring Miller to walk back his own story, framing it as a misunderstanding and quietly suggesting TJ was the one out of line. Hollywood's power structure is built to crush anyone who challenges its biggest stars, and TJ, already navigating a rocky patch in his own career, was in a genuinely vulnerable position. Ryan knew exactly how to exploit that, betting TJ would put his career ahead of the truth. Not long after, TJ showed up on a separate radio program, and the shift in his tone was immediate. The confident guy who'd called out one of the industry's most powerful figures had vanished, replaced by someone who sounded worn down and defeated. He told the host it was all just a misunderstanding they'd cleared up quickly, and even apologized for the fact that his own comments had gotten media attention. Years later, on SiriusXM's The Bonfire, TJ went even further and walked back everything he'd said before. The same guy who'd once sworn he was done sharing a set with Ryan now openly said he wanted back into the franchise. Ryan never had to apologize, never had to change. He just leaned on his wealth and connections and waited until TJ had no option left but to crawl back for a shot at being welcomed into his orbit again. That's the uncomfortable truth about forgiveness in Hollywood. It's rarely about learning from mistakes. It's about who holds the connections. And people like Ryan control the entire game. So, what do you think? Have you ever watched someone completely change the moment they tasted real power? And do you think TJ Miller was genuinely pressured into taking back his story? Or do you think he made a calculated choice to protect his own career? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. If this one kept you hooked, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Clout Fallout so you don't miss the next update on this story.